Wendy Jelbert is a professional artist, author and teacher who works in pastels, oils, acrylics, inks and watercolors. In this video, Wendy will show you some of her favorite techniques and let you into some of her secrets in the wonderful medium of line and wash.
Hello and welcome to my studio. This is the powerhouse where it all seems to happen. I organise my talks, my teaching and my paintings for galleries. Now I want to share with you some of the ideas I have, and let's start by looking at my sketchbook. The importance of a sketchbook is to put down lots of ideas and experiment with those ideas. Here I've used a black and white photograph and worked from it in wash and pen and put down lots of ideas that I can change the different aspects of it for future paintings. This is a detail sketch in a waterproof ink of an old doorway denoting chains and grasses and old wood and bricks. I've also done quite a detailed sketch too in watercolours of the vines, and both of these are a French scene, and this is just in case I wanted to put this around the door themselves. Here is a detail of a sunflower in a non-waterproof ink, and when you put water up to your drawing it runs in all different directions and gives you a marvellous sense of tone. I've done all details of the centre, the leaves and the seed head of the sunflower. These two dandelion heads were painted in with watercolours and outlined a little bit with ink, and here I've done ink drawing over the watercolour wash and colour notes with blobs of watercolour instead of colour notes in writing. This is a pen drawing of a sea scene, but why I've left this blank is that because the tide was kept changing and it's very difficult to capture, we took a series of photographs and backed it up with a detailed drawing of the windmill and pub and buildings behind, but they did marry together in the end. These Greek cats were great fun to do, but they were infuriating because they kept moving, and the only way that you can capture the whole thing is quick sketches. The tone was created by washing up against the non-waterproof ink with water. A sketchbook shouldn't really be just for future paintings, but a diary and a trip up memory lane. And here I've got maps and all kinds of little bits and pieces, even tickets and wine labels. Well, if you haven't started a sketchbook, do start one now. It's such fun, and you'll plot your progress and you could fill it up with all kinds of memorabilia. Right, now let's start again on another project, my Pandora's box. This is my treasure trove full of little gems with different surfaces. A piece of wood, corn on the cob, a shell, and for the project we're going to do, the surface of a feather. I've placed the feather on my sketchbook and I'm doing a quick pencil sketch. I always find that this is much easier because you can rub it out afterwards and you've got a really good guideline. Right, we're filling this bit in like that, placing this bit there. Just got that in through there. Right, it's as simple as that.
Right. And action.
Right, this is the waterproof ink, and I'm going to do the centre first and slightly tapering it. There we go. Putting a little bit of shadow around the structure. Now what you do need to really take on board is that you mustn't make this flat because it's slightly curved, and we put a bit of shadow on the edge. So it gives you a much more realistic look to it. And then we'll block in the main shape. This bit there. Now when you're doing something that's fairly rigid and it's got lots and lots of the same kind of line, miss a few out and then re-emphasize it somewhere else so that your eye will naturally feed into all this uniform pattern. But because you've lifted the pen and you've got just a few lines, it will read over the surface as the whole surface has got this kind of rigid design. And then we'll do the other side. Leave out some, put some in. And then I'm going to put the dark patterning on there. It's quite dense really, but fades as it comes down towards the centre. Dark bit there. And there's a few tufts here. I don't think I'll bother with the shadow. A few more markings on this side. Little dark markings on this side. And to emphasize that kind of curl. A couple of lines. It is rather darker at the top here, so I can intensify that tone there. There. Now this is another drawing, but it's identical in that there's the feather, but I've drawn it in a non-waterproof ink. Can you see the way it's running? It's absolutely gorgeous. Just run the water up against it and it swooshes out. And of course the more pen line you put on, the darker it'll become when you wash the water over. Here we are. Simple as that it is, and that is a non-waterproof ink. We're going to study surfaces now and the illusion of surfaces. Here in this cat picture, can you see that the fur isn't really fur, but it's the contrast between the darks and the lights, and breaking into that body design gives you the feeling of the fur. And here in the whiskers, it's the dark, sharp lines up against the light really gives you the illusion of the whisker feature. Similarly, in this wood picture, the bark is quite interesting. For the texturing, I've put sharp little lines just broken up, giving you the texture. But with the foliage, can you see there are little lines also, but going at a different angle? You can't draw in every leaf, and this is creating the illusion of the foliage. Here's some more examples of surfaces in the small cameo form. Here is massed foliage from a distance. Now here's some very interesting middle distance study, and note how dark some of the areas are against the open weave of the lighter area. Here the grass effect has got very light lines and heavier lines, and with this one the white areas are just as important as the heavier drawn areas. Here with this stone wall texturing, can you see all this variety of shapes which make it very, very interesting, and the light and the dark shapes between them. Now here's a lot of different surfaces, and you need to go away and practice these with a waterproof pen. The more you practice, the better you'll be at it. Now to create tone with a linear drawing is how you amass the line. So that is a fairly light tone, and then you can get a darker tone by putting the lines closer together, or a darker tone still by amassing them very, very close together here. So repeat that again. Lighter tone, lines far apart, middle tone, medium spacing, and dark tone, very, very close together. So can you see the difference between the amount of tone needed? This massed foliage effect is produced by putting non-waterproof or water-soluble ink on and washing over to get the tone with water. And the more ink you put on, the darker the area becomes. Here the black ink has been washed in with the water, but I've left the white areas to give more contrast. Here with the grass, I've lifted some of the water-soluble ink and moved it over the page, giving you long, stabby marks. Now the stones, I've washed some of the black ink onto the white surface, and it's given you a variety of different tones of dark, medium and light. This is a really popular way of painting pen and wash, and do have a try, and you really will enjoy it. The importance of sketching out of doors is that it should be an adventure, and you should capture the movement and rhythm of the subject and the tone and the texture. Well, here I've found the absolute marvellous subject of this gnarled tree, and it offers everything I've been looking for, the texture and the movement and the tone. Here's my sketch that we did outside, and I've taken a photograph. I nearly always take photographs of my work, and this helps me with my detailed drawing. But I'm not going to put this fence in there, and now I'm going to work the whole drawing up. Now I'm going to do a quick pencil drawing in here, going into the negative shapes, the shapes between the objects first, and this just gives me a quick guideline as to where to place most of the main characters here. Right, I'm doing the base of the tree, the mossy roots, indentations coming up through here, that hole there, this bit here, that coming down there, and the lovely sweep of this back branch coming down here. Negative shapes a little bit wide, bringing it out so I've got a bit more of a swing in there. There we go. Right, I'm just going to do the basic outline so that it helps with the overall drawing here. Here we are. Round here. Fine. Mossy bits here. And the back bit here with the ivy on it. There we are. We've got a nice sweep of shadowed area here. It gives you some kind of movement. And it's quite flat across here, but quite dark. Right, let's try the mossy area first. It's kind of silky, but it's got lots of little bobbles on it. A few little dots and mounds. And it also shows up because we've got a dark area in the back. So you want to get that dark area around there. There we are. And then we'll get a little bit more detail into that on the other side. So we need to leave some spaces just to give the illusion of this soft surface, but with activity happening as well. Just to implant a little bit of shadow here and opening up the texture. Yeah. Right, let's have a go at the grasses. You press hard and let it taper, the pen taper. And these can be fairly random. They can droop or they can be quite pert and jump up and down like that. There we go. A little bit more there. Now I'm going to draw in the assortment of bark effects. Now if you do lines fairly close to each other as they go back and then widen the lines as they come forward, you get that feeling of kind of aerial perspective. It goes back like that. And as it comes forward, I've got varying little marks here to give you an assortment of textures. Right, I'm going to darken in this area, a really dark but quite an attractive line, and then back down again with quite vicious stabbing marks really to get the depth. Right, I've just finished off putting a few more little grasses in, and now I'm going to do a completely different texture of some of the little weeds down at the base here. But I'm placing in the star shapes of these weeds, making them slightly different so it gives a bit of added interest, and then pressing quite hard for the dark negative shapes between them. So we've got some really quite abstract shapes here, and then little bits of line over that, so you've got the feeling of close leaves, distant ones, and tucked in the shadowed ones. I need to bring some of the root system at the back, darken this, so it's the surrounding areas that change the tone really. So that's light against dark, and then dark against light, and with a little bit of chicken wire decorating the top. Now this back branch that swings into the distance has got shadow on it, and it's also got a lovely curve to the surface. So the way we do that is to bring a few lines across the surface, just denoting that the whole thing has got some kind of curved effect. There we go. And then we get some darks scribbling down here to give you more form to it. Round we go. I'm doing different kind of lines because if you did the same kind of lines all the way across the surface, it would be really boring. There we are, bringing that around, building that up with small, delicate lines, but fairly vigorous. And then this is really deep here, and this back branch also needs to be dark in contrast with the lichen in the foreground here, and that drops down here, round that way. Now I'm going to darken this hole by a series of cross hatchings really, that way, but down again, because this is the darkest part of the picture, dragging that line down there and that line down there, connecting it to the rest of the tree. Now the ivy is lovely kind of wandering marks that are in contrast to the sun at the back of the tree itself. So we're bringing these marks down, lovely and dark, but fairly random. You don't have to lift the pen off the page at all. Up we go. Yeah. Using all the techniques I've just showed you, I've done another version of the tree and enhanced it with quite a lot of different details. Can you see the background? It's slightly darkened there, giving you the feeling of distance. I've darkened and detailed this back branch down here and done a little bit more to the lichen and deeper grooves here. Now I must emphasize that all this picture does take a little time because you are relying on just one edge of your pen and not a brush which covers the area much quicker. So the whole of this really does require at least 20 minutes to half an hour. And I've just darkened in a little bit more here, a little bit more detail here, and that's the finished sketch. For our next exercise, we're going to do a mushroom in different ways, and I'm using a ruling drawing pen here using Quink Ink Neat, and we're going to use more water with it as the exercise goes on. Now I've watered down some Quink Ink. Oh, it's quite a lot of water in it, and I'm going to do the background fairly quickly because the Quink Ink separates with water into blues and yellows, so I'm putting quite a lot of wash into the background. Now this shows up the edge of the mushroom. Lovely light halo there. And then I'm going to bring another wash into the foreground, giving a nice curved effect there. So it's dark against light, light against dark. A little bit more ink into this time so that I can get the gills nice and dark. And perhaps put a little bit of white paper onto the gills. Now this edge is really quite important. Can you see this edge coming towards you now? Needs to be kept clear of any ink. Round we go. There. Bit more water. A little bit more water here. And the top of the mushroom has got a tiny dimple in it, and we've got another wash coming down here, giving it a bit of a shadow. Bit more water and some shadow underneath. This is reflecting the shape of the mushroom and it gives a little bit more structure. And a tiny bit of dark back underneath here. With a water-soluble pen, I've drawn in quite deeply here and allowed more white paper so that the tone is less there. And I'm going to dip this into water and wash over the surface. So we've got a variety of tonal areas, bringing that colour over here. It's quite quick, this is. Round there, and the body of the mushroom, and then we can lift some of this colour and put it into the shadowed area. So I can lift this colour here and run the paint around the colour around this area so it bleeds the colour out around there, lifting a little bit more of this colour and allowing it to become the shadow area. A little bit of shadow around here, dimple bit just across this top bit there. This mushroom has decided on the lines and the very, very tight massed drawing for the tonal effect. The beauty of this monochrome is that it's done in sepia ink, and it's the amount of water you use with it, and it gives the most lovely old-fashioned sepia photographic effect. This is a bold sketch using a brush pen, and this is a very similar one to a felt tip pen. I did this gentle outline of the mushroom with a steel nibbed pen, waterproof, and then with a gentle washes of watercolour filled the colour effects in. This quink ink mushroom was washed in with water, and as it slowly dries, the ink separates into various colours, but notice this area, the beautiful yellow bloom that's come out of it. Right, now we've done the basic exercises with a pen, let's be a little bit more experimental. Now we're going to try out some salt. First of all, this tree in snowstorm picture has been drawn in with ink using my ruling drawing pen, and the tree is allowed to dry. And then I'm going to do a wash of blue ink over the surface, very wishy-washy, all over here. There we go. A little bit more water. And then sprinkle some salt into the surface. If you give it a little time, you'll notice that the starring effect appears, but you have to be very patient. It doesn't come immediately, and on different papers, of course, it reacts in different ways. When it's completely dry, you can rub off with the side of your fingers the excess salt. Yes, the salt gives a lovely dappled, starry, spangly effect. It also gives excellent results for foliage, and you just drop the salt in the normal way into an ink or watercolour wash. By using white ink with a ruling drawing pen, you can get quite dramatic effects, and by drawing backwards and forwards you can get a large area covered quickly, or you can get a very small delicate area. There we are. It's quite fun, isn't it? Now let's just turn this into a daisy with several petals. It doesn't take very long to dry. The coloured paper does add drama, and it's quite absorbent. Yes, do have a go yourself, because it's very simple, and it looks very convincing. The thin lines, and then thicken up by just running the pen backwards and forwards over the same area. Now I find this exercise great fun. Now try out a sponge and put it into a watercolour or coloured ink and dab the surface, giving you a rather mottled rendering of perhaps foliage, and then put it over another colour, and that colour shines through. Now this sample is again done with a sponge, but on a wetted surface with oranges and greens, and this one has got three colours: brown, blue and orange on top, so it's very sparkly. Now masking fluid works extremely well with washes of inks or watercolours, and here I've got a window sample, and I'm putting in the details across here, and I've actually coloured my masking fluid to show up where it is, and then when that's dried I put a watercolour wash over the whole surface and allow it to dry, and the lighter details come out through the wash and protect the surface, so you've got a precise detail hidden under your wash. Here in this cottage study I've completed the window and put some highlights on the wicket gate. Now coloured inks are vibrant and vivacious, they are, and they glow. Here I've got bands of different colours, and I'm going to glaze over the top with a blue, and you can see that it alters the colours underneath, and with this blue going across the blue it's actually intensified that area. Now likewise with the yellow, this adds a lovely glow to it and enlivens the colour underneath. Now this cockerel picture just bursts with colour, doesn't it? And it encompasses some of the experiments we've already done. The masking fluid and the white ink, the colour itself, and then I've glazed over the yellow with a brown, and it just glows. Now I'm attempting a stormy picture in Quink ink. Big clouds sweeping across the sky, and I'm putting quite a lot of water with this, so it spreads the ink out quite economically all over the surface. Now as this dries, this separates into yellows and blues. The more water I put with it, the more likely this is going to happen. I can drop a little bit of ink into that and it can run down. Here we go. And darken this up here a little bit more. As we come down to the ground area, I can sweep a big piece of neat quink over the surface. So this is going to be the darkest part, and a small path going. This is Winchester Hill, this is. Round here. Running the water into that. A little bit more water still. And I've got a rain cloud coming over here, diffusing the edge of the hill. A little bit more water up into the cloud area. Yes, you see that's gives a little bit more encouragement, that one does, and a bit more bullying over there. A little bit of dark at the edge here. There we are. A bit more there, and a few trees in the foreground, adding a bit more interest. There we are. Bit of neat ink. And soften the edge up here a little bit more. Now this area is blooming a little bit. I'm not very happy with this, so I'm softening and emphasising the path, doing this side as well. So we get a little bit more around the focal point here. Right, before we go on to the next section, I've allowed the Quink ink to dry and just noticed how beautiful, how magical some of these areas are, the yellows and the blue. Now I've returned with thumbnail sketches of fence and stiles and trees, but I've chosen this fence with the stiles, and I haven't chosen this tree because I think this one's much too busy, but I've chosen this tree, and I've taken a photograph of it, and I think it's a lovely shape. And for our project we're going to combine the stile and fence with a tree. But first of all I'm going to show you some of the mistakes that are commonly made before you start. Now in this one we've got our two objects, the tree and the fence, but they're separated, and when you are combining them you need to bond one over the other, and if you land up like this you've got a split focal point. It's a very unhappy feeling that you get, so bond one over the other. Now here the tree is plonked right in the middle of the fence, and it's accentuated by the path leading up to it. So don't divide your composition in half. Now here the fence and the stile is just a bit too pristine. It's a bit too regimented, and what you need to do is to put another post perhaps at a different angle and to break up this very uniform design. But this is a very common mistake, and it sometimes makes me laugh really, because you've got the fence post with a tree growing out of the top and grasses that seem to grow on top of the fence. So you need to bring down your objects in the distance, well behind or well round the object in front of it. Now this is going to be a very quick thumbnail sketch of some of the points that I've already mentioned and correcting them. The fence is going to be rather rickety with the stile attached to it. We've got the fencing all falling all over the place. Makes it a little bit more interesting, and some of the posts actually I think falling over. There we are. And the tree at the back, an interesting shape, but dark and not quite growing up the top of the fence posts. The step of the stile and the path leading in to the subject matter itself. There we go. Now these are a few more thumbnail sketches that work. The path leads in the opposite way, the tree is slightly smaller, and we've got the strong fence design in the foreground here. We've got more of a meandering path, more of the foreground here, a little fence and stile, and a more distant tree. Now the foreground is quite dominant in this picture, plus a silhouetted fence in the middle distance, and the tree with all its beauty in the distance. But the whole thing is concentrating on the foreground and the tree. Now what we're doing in this first stage is I'm organising the different trees and the gates and stile and different compositions. So we are, right, I'm moving the tree around and moving the fence posts around, so we've got a different composition for each stage. Now I've got some sky, got a wash of sky around my tree, and then the tree washed in with olive green watercolour and a little spot of blue. So my tree is distant with a wash, and then I'm going to put some pen drawing in on top to emphasise the details. So we've got a quick little wash of a tree, getting some of this excess water out. The trunk in with brown, gently does it. Some of the branches, some of the dark shadowy bits, a little bit of the path coming forward. This distant hill. It doesn't matter if it runs a little bit, because the beauty of watercolour is its limpid feel and the way it washes around into other colours. And then placing in the fence and style in the front here. A little bit of dark in the tree. And then just waiting for this to dry to put the ink on top. I've just dropped some yellow foreground in and yellow into the tree and let it dry, and now I'm emphasising and drawing in the fence and the style. It's quite easy to do. I just draw over the top of the dried watercolour wash. Now the beauty of this picture is just the tiny accents of ink to the detail parts and leaving most of it untouched and relying on your watercolour wash. Now this is another variation on the theme, is that I've done the drawing in with waterproof ink, and this is the tree at the back of the stile and fence, and then I'm going to do a water-soluble wash of ink. Now at this stage you can use coloured inks or watercolour, it doesn't really matter, it depends on what you've got really. So I'm putting green in here, so this is a foil at the back of the fence. So I run the paint or the ink, whichever you have, into the background so it shows up the edge. Can you see it shows up the edge of the fence, and then dropping a bit of darker colour with a bit of blue into the background here. Wow, look at that. There we are. So this is a true combination of both the ink and the watercolour. So we've got the colour introduced into the drawing. Now I haven't drawn around this part, so I can paint that bit. A little bit of burnt sienna to get some warmth into this. There we go. And let that run down. There we are, into the drawing. And add a bit of foreground, a bit of yellow, a bit of green. Let that run again. I'm adding a little bit more yellow to the foreground and a bit of yellow around the base of the stile, and drop some into the tree. So we've got the colour reflected up and down into the painting, and add a bit of cerulean blue into the background, so we've got some distant hills or fields, so it leads the eye through the gate or stile into the distance. Now it's dried, it's lightened a lot, so I'm emphasising the dark area again with some deeper green so that it helps with the structure of the style. Now in watercolours and in inks, when it dries, it can dry up to 40% lighter, which is quite amazing really. Now with a sepia pen, steel nibbed pen, waterproof pen, I'm just emphasising just the final details over the dried watercolour wash or ink wash, and a bit of shadow on the fence, adding a little bit of drama and pushing the distance into right away from us. Now the last of our project is the water-soluble ink with watercolours so that it runs. Can you see the way it just oozes out from the drawing? So I'm running in the sky. I love this kind of painting because there's a lot of happy accidents, hopefully. A little bit more blue into the distance. That's the hills at the back. And I've also put some masking fluid on in the tree and in the foreground, and that's put on just here and through here, and allowed to dry, of course, before I can put my wash on. A quick wash of green into the tree and run over the ink. So there's an explosion of ink and watercolour all together. Just adding a little bit more yellowy green into this area here. It's all running beautifully, and tiny little bit into the foreground so you get more idea of what's happening. Because I've used masking fluid, you always have to put colour in behind, otherwise it won't show off the beauty of it when you rub it out, of course. And a tiny bit of colour into the path. And for the last feature, I'm going to put in the fence and the stile. So this is just brown watercolour over the non-waterproof ink, and it's all running beautifully. Yeah. Here we go. Now it's all dried, I can rub off the masking fluid and then highlight the cow parsley with the pen. Just draw in underneath. Now the lacery of the branches is emphasised when I've rubbed off the masking fluid. Look, isn't it gorgeous? Here we are. And then, getting my pen, I can put the shadowy bits in underneath, or go off at a completely different angle and have another branch in, so it can add highlights or depth. Now for the very last stage, I've washed over some of the masking fluid with a pale blue to just push those brighter branches back into shadow. Now this is a very interesting project and easy for you to do. You can go out and choose your own tree and your own 5-bar gate or stile or fence and compose a series of compositions for yourself. And it really is great fun, and it really extends your imagination and pulls you in all different directions. And now you'd go out and have a little go by yourself. Right, looking around this church, I'm trying to find something that reflects its age and texture. Well, this is the lovely door I found, and just look at the texture and the colouring, the beautiful reds of the brick and greys of the textured flint. It's absolutely lovely, isn't it? And the grey, old, decaying door. Now this is my photograph of the old door, and I've taken it at a slight angle to get the full beauty of it all, and I've done a full drawing in waterproof ink of the door and all its surrounds. Now I'm going to start first of all with the old door. It's such a gorgeous old thing, this is, with lots of character, and it's bleached with age. So I've got a neutral grey, and I'm going to wash all over the area here, perhaps adding a tiny touch of blue for a bit more interest, and doing that lovely woody grain all over it. And the ink marks are coming through it, showing the actual wood grain going this way and downwards. Right, one of the most favourite features I like doing is brickwork. It's all yummy, and you can run an all over colour over it, straight over the surface. So I've got burnt sienna, a little bit more water, and because this is waterproof ink, of course it doesn't run, it stays the same. Right, that over here. A little dash of ready mixed orange, which adds a bit of sparkle, perhaps another little accent here. Bit of vermilion. There's one or two quite bright bricks amongst all this lot. And a little bit of blue. Now look at this area, it's an array of different shapes because of the flint. I'm washing the neutral grey over the whole area, adding a bit more water because it's very light as it comes down against the top of the door. And then while that's wet, I'm doing wet into wet, little blobs denoting the assortment flints. There we go. Some of them are have been drawn in, and some of them have been just dropped in. Touch of blue again. Right, to get a more realistic effect to the flints, I'm just going to lift out some of the paint, so pull that out like that. Dry middle there, and then draw around the edge, because some of these flints have got a really quite sharp edge. Some of them are dark, some of them are light, so just emphasising several of the shapes, and then perhaps drawing in a couple. Right, I'm just completing the brickwork. It's quite a laborious job this, but I've washed in the other side fairly quickly, but this one has got a bit more detail in that the mortar is showing between the bricks. I haven't done it all over because again it can be a bit boring. Can you see the white paper is just showing up in some of the places, and washing over the last bit with, well, quite quickly. There we go. Right, the next step is the pebbled path. I'm doing a quick wash over this area, and I'm going to splatter. Now, perhaps some of you have never done this before, and some of you are old hand at it. What you need to do is to get it loaded on your brush with a darker colour, in this case, and then you just splatter tiny stones, pebbly bits. Right, I think it just needs a few more pebbles. Right, now the last little touch, the icing on the cake, is putting in the shadows, and this is a violety blue. You need to look quite hard at where the shadows fall, but it just finishes things off beautifully and brings the structure of things to life. Well, I stumbled across this lovely cottage in the village because it had so much potential. Now, the gateway, I wasn't really happy about it being closed, so I opened the gate, and this cut up the fence a bit. As always, I take quite a lot of photographs from different angles to back up all my reference points. This is so important for painting later on. As well as the sketches, I make written colour notes, which are very, very important. Right, and for our final project, we're going to use this drawing projector. Even if you can draw, it makes things much easier and it saves time. And if you can't draw, it really does help. The very first thing you do is you put the photograph in between these two prongs on the side here and close, then turn on the machine. This projects the image down onto the paper, and you can adjust the size of your drawing or painting accordingly. Now I can draw at all the different angles, perspective, and all the tiny details come out absolutely pristine. It's such a simple device and very, very easy to use. It really comes into its own when you've got an intricate fence like this one. You can undertake the details so quickly and so accurately. Now I've done the basic drawing in with pencil, and I'm doing the remainder of the details in with pen. Now then, I'm going to turn the projector off and let's start the painting. This final sketch encompasses everything that we've done so far. I've put the masking fluid on, I've drawn everything with pencil and then drawn over the top with water-soluble and waterproof ink. Now my brush is laden with lots of burnt sienna for the bricks, and wash this over the masking fluid, a bit over this other side, so it looks as if the bricks come from one side of the porch to the other. Lovely piece of orange here over the other side there. And I can bring this colour down through the gate. Yes, this frontage reminds me a little bit of a face, and this has got a lovely little red glowy cheek here. There. I've completed the brickwork with a little bit of violet mixed in with the burnt sienna and starting on the foliage. Now can you see that I haven't put the ink all the way round the bush, but just partly, so it's broken up, and this is a non-waterproof ink and it's running a little bit. There. Right, continuing with this bush, bringing it right down past the doorway, through the railings. I can always go over the railings afterwards just to complete this foreground bit, and place the greenery over the other side, just softening the edge of it, otherwise it's going to be too hard and unnatural looking. Over here and down the other side, and let's just run that in underneath the other window. Now I'm just adding a little bit of olive green into this, give me a bit more structure down round the railings to the ground level. Same to the other side. So it doesn't matter if it runs over the ink at all, because it's not going to make it run, and the railings are there forever. Now just a little bit more intricate work around here. There's some kind of rose bush, rose tree coming up from the side of the door here. Just lift the brush and then dab it down again. A couple of leaves. There. Right, I'm placing dark paint in here. I've put masking fluid all around the window and I'm going to rub that off in a minute, but beforehand I need to put all this darker paint, perhaps just lightening it slightly as it goes away in the distance, so that it's going to show up when I rub the masking fluid off. Now I'm placing in the structure of the porch by putting some shadowed area in underneath. Now can you see that I'm not being too pedantic about where the paint is going, because the whole picture could look very stilted and dead and a bit more like a photograph than it should be. So I'm letting it run over some of the edges, lifting the brush and again putting it down so it breaks the line. Another tiny little wash under here, bit of shadow. Right.
4.
Now we mustn't forget the rather ornate railings here. Rather splendid colour of a vivid green, quite distinguished. Placing some of these in. Again, I'm not putting them in as though they're a photograph. This is a painting, not a photograph. So I'm going to be quite free-spirited about it all. Building up the shape and the patterns slowly, no panicking here. Right, I've painted in the other 1001 railings in emerald green, and I'm going to do the chocolate door now, chocolate coloured door. This is burnt sienna and Van Dyke brown. Some of the panelling I've put in with waterproof ink, so they won't run at all. And this helps to get the structure of the foliage by having it dark against light. Now we've got a problem when we come up against the edge of the railings. So you have to be a little bit more careful here. You might notice that some of the railings are waving around a bit, but I think this makes it much more natural looking. Having some broken lines here. There we are, just a few negative shapes in there. Just some indication of a step. Okay. Now I'm just placing in the door panelling. Now can you notice that just around the door the light railings become very evident, don't they? And it's because I've kept tiny little slithers of white, and it does help with something that's in front of another darker object. Now tiny little spots of the path as we come along here towards the gate entrance. And then we have some quarry tiles, it looks like quarry tiles, and this reflects the bloom, the lovely colour of the brickwork above. Now the paintwork's dried, I'm going to rub off the masking fluid. It's a lovely feeling doing this. It's nearly there. Yeah. Now the masking fluid's rubbed off. I'm going to place in some of the structure of the window with a grey-blue. That gives it much more realism there. And wash over the mortar of these bricks. So the whole thing doesn't look Purcell white, but it's much more natural now. I've got my brush loaded with yellow now, and washing that over the exposed white paper from the masking fluid. Yes, there we are. Right, I'm just going to put the last tiny accents into the picture. And then we can call it a day then. There we are. At the start of a new course not long ago, I asked my students if there were any questions, and one lovely student said, "Am I good enough to be a beginner?" Well, that just says it all, really. Confidence comes with practice, and it's just up to you to do this. I do hope you've enjoyed this last hour together, and do go and practice the exercises and projects I've given you. This is such a lovely medium.
Do you like to paint? Want to improve your painting? Exhibit or sell your work? Find a teacher or students to teach? Or just get some inspiration? Well, the SAA, the Society for All Artists, exists to inform, encourage and inspire all who love to paint, whatever their ability. If you're a beginner, an amateur or professional, the SAA can help you. Anyone can join to enjoy the full-colour newsletter 6 times a year. Savings on over 5,000 items including books, videos and art materials. Insurance for paintings, events and exhibitions. And making friends with like-minded people. To find out, call 01949 844 050.
People, animals, architecture. How do artists manage to get perspective, scale and proportion right every time? Now it's easy. A drawing projector enables you to do in minutes what normally takes hours, leaving you free to add the creativity. To save time and improve your drawing skills, contact Teaching Art today.